Everybody, welcome to our next webinar. Today is a incredibly special day. I'm here with three amazing, talented women. And I think, the conversation has been on for some time around why aren't there more women in technology? Why aren't there more women in the boardroom? Why aren't there more women leading this nation? And I'm always saying, listen, men have had their shot. It's the decade of women ahead. And I believe that, and I'm so proud. I'm filming here at X Prize Foundation, and I'm very proud that the vast majority of our leadership are women, and we're a majority women-led organization, and we have an amazing dynamic as a result of that. So I am going to introduce the first amazing woman here, who is a dear friend. She is the author of my biography, called How to Make a Spaceship and the Story of the X Prize, Julian Guthrie. Julian, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you
Thank
here.
you. Oh, it's so nice to see you again and to connect
I,
with you. And we had so much fun together telling that crazy story.
I know we have, and I want to, let me do a proper introduction of you, and then you can introduce our two guests. And it really is about storytelling. It's about telling the story of incredible people, and changing the mindset and the ethos of what is possible and who can create and who can lead. So Julian Guthrie is a journalist and author. You're based in San Francisco. Spent 20 years at the San Francisco Chronicle, where she won numerous awards, and for feature writing and enterprise reporting. And I met you when you were first reporting on one of my company's planetary resources. Her new book is called Alpha Girls, the Women Upstarts Who Took on Silicon Valley's Male Culture and Made the Deals of a Lifetime, and was recently released. Alpha Girls is an unforgettable story of four women who came to California to try to make it in a world stacked against them. What isn't in your bio here is you're also the author of How to Make a Spaceship, and a wonderful person, and I'm grateful to have you in my life.
Thank you. That is mutual.
Would you do me the honor of introducing our two guests?
Of course. Well, How to Make a Spaceship first, though, was just an extraordinary adventure that we went on. And I got to spend, we spent so much time together, and I really saw how that story, which is based on your life and one person's passion, can really change history and make history and even galvanize an industry. So the book that I have written now it has similarities in that there's this underdog element and there's this really amazing technology that is in the backdrop. Alpha Girls is, as you said, there it is, this story of four women who figured out a way to become very successful in this world that was seemingly or is seemingly inhospitable to women. And we have two of them with us today. And they really helped finance and build some of the foremost companies of our day. And yet, like so many women's stories, they just have not been told as they should be. So I found four principal characters, real women, but they definitely are characters. And I tell their stories, their personal lives and their professional lives, their hopes and their dreams and how they succeeded, and the regrets or their missteps as well. And I think the story is one that offers a lot of takeaways for what to do, what not to do, how women in particular in these male-dominated industries can succeed. So we have with us Magdalena Yesil, who I love her story so much. She came to America from Istanbul, Turkey, with $43 and 9 gold bracelets to her name. She became an electrical engineer at Stanford, working the night shift in the computer center. And there are really fun stories within. And she goes on to be an entrepreneur and then the financial backer of a rather significant company, which we'll get into, and also continues as an entrepreneur and is an entrepreneur today. We also have Sonja Hoel Perkins, who also has a phenomenal story. She came from Charlottesville, found her way to Silicon Valley, landed her dream job at Menlo Ventures, and started to, again, finance and build these really significant game-changing companies. In her case, that would make the internet safer, more secure, and faster. So the other two women have extraordinary stories as well. But that's kind of teeing them up here.
Well, Magdalena, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure to have you there. And Sonja, welcome as well. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to, for those women who are watching us, I think having role models and proof points of what is possible is critically important. And for men watching, understanding the power of women to help you is your partners, your CEOs, your board members, and your employees is critically important. And so this is a critically important webinar, and I'm grateful to have all of you on this. And let me start, Julian, with you, because I remember when we finished How to Make a Spaceship, you were looking for your next story, and you were looking for something that would be powerful on a global stage. I guess one of the questions is, how difficult was it to find these four women who are willing to open up, and what's been sort of the immediate impact of this? And then I want to get into their stories individually, if I could.
So it's interesting because when we were spending time together promoting How to Make a Spaceship, I would look around, and you have so many extraordinary people in your world, in the world of the X Prize and A360, and so many amazing women on your team. But there would be so few women, in the startup of the entrepreneurs, of the engineers, in aerospace, in rocketry. And I was like, these are such dynamic fields, and why are there so few women? And that actually started me on this journey. So you played a really pivotal role in my experience going around and talking and seeing the extraordinary people who are in your life as well. But it was hard to find it was not hard to find successful women, but in venture capital, as you know, today, 92% of all investing partners, those who are writing the checks, are men. And of the $130 billion deployed by venture capitalists last year, only $2.5 billion of that, 2%, went to women-founded firms. So these are startling, shocking, just period wrong numbers. But I want to always tell my stories, write stories that are driven by an individual's journey, and what are they hoping for? What are their goals? How do they succeed? Where do they stumble? And so I searched for these. At the time when I started my reporting, it was 94% of all of the investing partners are men, and today it's 92%. So there's an incremental gain. But I cast a wide net at first. Interviewed a ton of people, interviewed all the founding fathers of venture capital, Arthur Rock and Bill Draper and those legends. And then I started zeroing in on the women who had succeeded. And I wanted to find women who had funded and helped build companies that were irrefutably theirs, or that the companies that had changed in some way, galvanized an industry, made history in some way. Again, these companies where they played an irrefutable role. And then I wanted stories also where the women came from very different places and had very different perspectives and very different investment kind of methodologies even. And so that almost like pieces of a puzzle, they would stand alone. They were really, really beautiful when put together because they were very different from one another. But getting them to tell their personal stories, especially their vulnerabilities and their challenges, that was uniquely difficult to this book, which makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, and I can imagine that for sure. And I'm going to start with, I really want during this hour together to be pulling out the nuggets of advice and really impactful. What does it mean to women watching and to men watching, and what do you want, because we only have a limited amount of time together. And Sonja, let me begin with you, if I could. And if you were giving advice to your younger self, out of college, what do you distill now that you wish you were able to have told yourself if you went back in time? Could you give me that? Are there a few powerful nuggets there that are important to you?
One thing I was very lucky about when I was younger is that my parents really believed in me. And so I was able to really believe in myself. And just this belief in myself was just so powerful and determining if, what I could do next. And this fun story was I decided I wanted to be a venture capitalist after college. I moved to Boston. I didn't have a job, and I had to be in venture capital. And I got an apartment still without a job. And my dad said, Sonja, you don't have a job. You're going to get an apartment. That doesn't make any sense. And I asked him, I said, do you want me to come home? And I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia. And he's like, no, not at all. And so I actually got a job offer from another firm, and I turned it down because it wasn't a venture capital firm. And I did it because I had a strong belief. And so I really wanted the job, and I really believed I could get the job. And I think that's helped me my entire life. But the one thing that I didn't really appreciate was how important networks were and how important female networks were. And, one of the things that I was able to kind of get through was I realized when I first joined my first venture capital firm, TA Associates in Boston, I think it was the second week or third week of being there. And I realized I was the only woman in the Boston office. And it was almost like all the air had been deflated out of my tire or my balloon or whatever. And I thought, oh no, they must have just hired me because I was a woman. And so what I decided to do was just snap out of it and just say, you know what, I could spend a lot of time and energy worrying about discrimination and worrying about if they hired me because I was the only woman or because I was a woman. But I decided to forget about it. And I was just going to focus on people, and people were people, which was a great way to get through, all kinds of career things. And I actually believed it, and it was easy and it was fun. And I loved everybody that I worked with. But I forgot to make female friendships that were work related. And I realized it wasn't until about 2008 when I had a health crisis and I had challenges related to that and being a new mother. And I had no trusted friends who were my peers, who actually did high technology, venture capital investing, who also were mothers, who also might have had challenges. And so I just kind of had to navigate it on my own. And that was really difficult. And it was also glaring in terms of what I needed. And so that's when we started Broadway Angels along with Magdalena and Jennifer Fonstad, where we just created this amazing network of female investors where we had a purpose of actually investing. And then also we've grown into these great friendships. And so what I wish that I had figured out much earlier was just trusted female friends that are peers. And
is that also because you were driven and wanting to really compete in a man's world in that time frame, if you would, in venture capital, that you felt if you had gone towards more trusted female friends, it would have been a sign of weakness? Or what was it that didn't have you doing?
Well, the funny thing was, I just loved being a venture capitalist, like beyond. I couldn't even believe it was my job. I got to talk on the phone all day and spend money. I mean, it was just great and meet the most optimistic entrepreneurs. And most of the people in the field were men. And so it was very logical to just focus on working and networking with men. And so it wasn't really a strategy. It just was kind of the reality. But then when you needed those great girlfriends, I didn't have them.
Interesting. Magdalena, let's go to you. Is there a lesson that you would go back to your younger self and sort of say, if there's one thing I can tell you, this is what you need to do now that you're going to discover 20 or 30 years from now?
Get an A in attitude and an F in victim, for starters. So I'm very much building on what Sonja said. It's the attitude that matters more than anything else, and the attitude about yourself, the attitude about those around you. Ultimately, how you deliver what you're saying
is just as important as what you're saying. So if you have an attitude of self-confidence, of conviction, that is actually going to carry the day a lot more than you think. And then get an F in victim. Is there, if we're looking for discrimination, if we're looking for people who are actually out there to hurt us, to get our job, to make sure we don't get the promotion, they'll be there. We'll find them. It'll be very easy to find. But in fact, having this attitude that no matter what happens to me, I'm not a victim. I actually can be in control of what's going on around me. Maybe not control what others are doing, but I can control how I feel about what is going on. And I think that feeling of never allowing yourself to feel like a victim, never having that feeling of hurt in the workplace, because that's not a word that really fits a professional vocabulary. The other piece of advice is perfection is your enemy. I think that we, especially as females, fall into that trap a lot. I certainly did multiple times in my career where I was trying to just be perfect. And in fact, 80% is good enough. You're really wasting your time with the additional 20%. And guess what? You'll never reach perfection. So accepting that and moving on and feeling good about the job you've done and not beat yourself up because you're not perfect.
I love that. I want to flip it and now say if you could change, I guess one of the questions is in the tech world, there's still a vast majority male-dominated leadership, board leadership, entrepreneurial, and so forth. What's driving that? Do you guys think what's causing the numbers to be so skewed? And let's talk about what would change that. Historically, part of the conversation is that women have a clock about having kids and they want to start families, and there is a divide between how they use their time. Is that true? What is driving this great difference between the number of women and men? Who wants to? Sonja, do you want to kick it off first?
Sure. So in the venture industry, there obviously are many more men than there are women. And even the entrepreneurs that get funded are more men than they are women. And I think it's
but not by a little bit, by a lot.
By a lot, it's because like hires like, right? It's about the networks. It's about, this great guy from this other company, or this great guy from business school. And it's just a lot easier to hire people that are like yourself. And these venture capital firms are very small. It's not atypical to have 10 partners or less, and you spend a lot of time together, and they might say, gee, I'd rather just be with people that are like me because it's a lot easier. Because when you have a more diverse group of people, it's going to take more time. It's going to be it's going to be harder to make decisions, although there's lots of data that shows that diverse groups make better decisions. And I think another part of it is just kind of the reputation of the industry. I tell a story about my neighbor, and she has 2 daughters, and she said, I would never want my daughter to be a venture capitalist. And I was like, why is that? And she said, well, it's like the wolves of Wall Street. I wouldn't want to subject them to that kind of behavior. And I think that's a media thing. I did not experience that as a venture capitalist. And so, the way we're going to fix the problem to get more women in venture capital and thus more women in technology is we need to inspire more women to get into venture capital and want to get into technology. And so that's why, I've devoted the last 10 years with Broadway Angels and trying to show the world that there are amazing women who have been incredibly successful funding companies like Tesla and Salesforce and, Trulia. And they've been incredibly successful, and then trying to inspire these women and girls to want to be like these women, and then also inspiring men to say, wow, this is a huge competitive advantage. We can hire a woman who has a different point of view, and maybe they'll invest in a company like The Real or Hint Water, or companies that maybe might not be obvious to the male, group, but are incredibly obvious to a female.
I think
And
it's
Sonja,
also, yeah,
good.
I'll just add one thing quickly. I think it's also in talking with a lot of the male venture capitalists, where some confided in me that I think it's just exposure, to what they're accustomed to. And as Sonja was saying, these are very small, almost families that develop, and these men who have been very comfortable working with men and with funding men who look very much like them. One leading venture capitalist, a man, actually told me that he didn't know how, for instance, a woman would be able to fire a man, or he wanted, a man with him in the trenches, so to speak. But I think that's more of a lack of experience of working with really exceptional women, like the ones that I got to tell their stories in the book. I think it's, again, you can't be what you can't see. And that goes for younger women who will now be able to see these extraordinary women who did it and are continuing in the industry, but also men who will see, this model of women who will be team players, but who will be trailblazers, who will bring their own voice to the table. So I really think it's presenting, as Sonja said, these kind of models, these prototypes, these real life trailblazers, but who went from navigating to pioneering. So I think it's showing it on all sides, what's possible.
So let me ask, Magdalena, in the entrepreneurial world, in terms of the number of women CEOs, number of women startup entrepreneurs, the numbers are, what are they, 10 to 1?
But growing.
And growing, yes. But
Yes.
What's been the reason that it's been historically that low, besides like hires like? Are there other reasons?
Well, I do think that we're not going to have gender equality in numbers until we have gender equality at home in the child rearing jobs. Because let's face it, most women and men start out kind of on equal footing. They graduate from college. Right. They get the same types of jobs. They're associates in venture firms or investment banks, or, the product managers in tech companies. So everyone kind of starts out the same. Everyone kind of gets the same first or even second promotions. And then what happens is that women hit childbearing. And childbearing does derail, let's face it, the career of most women. While the men who have just had the same kids continue to get the promotions because they don't have a second shift. They are not going home and working really a second job. So yep. I do believe that we're going to have equality in the workplace when we get a lot more equality at the home. And furthermore, I think that we will get a lot more equality in the workplace when we can offer high quality childcare in the workplace. Because if I have 2 children and I go to work and my children are sick and now I have to rush to their, childcare, I'm probably taking half a day off, sometimes a full day off. And it just makes life a lot harder, usually for the woman, because usually it's the mother who rushes home, not the father. So I do think that there are some real specific societal reasons why we have fewer female CEOs in tech companies. But it's very heartwarming that there are many more today than there were when I first started my career. And thank you, Julian Guthrie, for writing this book, because role models are more important than anything else. The statistics are dismal. And I think we should stop quoting statistics because they're very depressing and they only discourage people. I really do believe this. I think that what we really should do is we should showcase successes. We should showcase those female CEOs who just rang the bell on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. That's what we need to do. We need those poster women, especially those who have their kids standing next to them.
Agreed. So we have a listen, I am, how do I put this? I'm proud of what we've done at X Prize in terms of having a significant number of women on the board and majority in our leadership and so forth. And I'm super proud of it. In our abundance community here that's watching right now, it is majority men by a significant amount. I think it tracks probably the tech industry and so forth. My amazing team, Marissa, I have two women who run different parts of Abundance, Marissa and Kelly, who run Abundance 360, and Bree, who runs Abundance Digital. And I'm clear about the extraordinary value that they bring. But still, our viewing audience here today, hi guys, are mostly guys.
So Peter, I have a question for you.
Have you
ever thought about doing an X Prize to improve the ratios of women in technology?
We actually have talked about.
Yeah?
We have actually talked about. We have a prize concept. I don't want to derail from the question, but ask you. We do want to create a women's an overarching bonus pool that says for any prize, there's a $5 million bonus if the prize is won by a female CEO or majority female team. So I want to incentivize more women to form teams and more teams to bring in more women into their leadership organization.
That's great.
And so there's an interesting cut both ways, right? Because one of the things that we discuss in my organizations is, do you want to, if you want to incentivize women coming in, but you don't want to insult women for coming in. In other words, you don't want to say it's $10,000 for men and $5,000 for women to come into an effort, right? And so there's a balance there that we want more women because we want great women. So there's a conversation there to be had. What I was going to ask you guys, though, is what is the message that you want to convey to the men watching right now about how they should think about hiring women, partnering with women, reporting into women? Is there we have a mostly anonymous audience here. What are the key points to be made? Sonja, you're here with me right now. Why don't you start with you?
Right. Well, I mean, I think men should almost have the same attitude as I did early on, is that people are people, right? People are people, but still try to be very focused on having diversity on the team and just recognize that diverse teams make better decisions, right? And and just not be afraid, or even more subtly, just be conscious of your unconscious biases, right? And a lot of people say, well, I'm not biased. I have a daughter, or I have a wife. Of course, I'm not biased against women. Yet, they're hiring like and like, and so I would just maybe have them be a little bit more aware. And sometimes awareness can create a great realization. And then also just recognize that women make great venture capitalists. They make great entrepreneurs. They make great workers. They make great mothers. They make great a lot of things. And just recognize that women are really great at these jobs. And there are many, many examples of them. So they're not actually lowering their standards when they hire a woman. And often that is said in the industry, like, oh, I don't want to lower my standards. But you might have to change your standards. So for example, in the venture capital industry, it's historically said, well, you have to be a CEO of a company in order to be a venture capitalist. A lot of VCs will say that you need to have CEO operating experience. Well, it's really hard when you have a certain percentage of CEOs are kind of the same percentage as women in venture. It's just very, very small. So your pool gets smaller. So you have to think broader, and you have to have broader criteria, and and then give it a try.
Okay, we're going to be going to questions very shortly, so please get your questions teed up. Magdalena and Julian, will go to you next. What's the message to the male tech audience out there, if anything different from what Sonja mentioned?
I would say...
Okay, Julian, you go ahead.
Okay, so I'd say grab a copy of Alpha Girls and read the book, because it is a kind of how-to book for women of all ages, but also for men to understand what are the ridiculous barriers that are put in women's way. But also look at these successes. you have with us today, we have Magdalena, who comes from Turkey with, very little, becomes an electrical engineer, becomes a successful serial entrepreneur, becomes the first investor and board member of Salesforce, and helps Mark Benioff build it from idea to IPO. You have Sonja Perkins, who, her investments have something like a $24 billion valuation. Again, her investments help make the internet safer and faster. You have Teresa Gao, another of the Alpha Girls, who, started out flipping burgers at Burger King as a youth, and today recently was called the most successful female venture capitalist, which of course she doesn't like the female part. She wants to be just among the most successful, but with a personal net worth of over 500 million. They build these companies, and MJ Elmore is the fourth Alpha Girl. So they all did something extraordinary, and they were in some ways, they were very relatable. They're very relatable women. They didn't start out as superstars, but they figured out a way to become successes. So I would say, read the book. It is so insightful for men and for women. It really offers a glimpse into what they're going through.
We'll go to questions in a moment, but first, Magdalena, wrap us up with this section message that you want to convey to the men watching and listening.
So I do not like the get hung up on the gender part of this discussion. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, gender matters, but don't let it matter so much that you are constantly conscious of it, because I think that people will not feel that comfortable. I mean, I'm an engineer. My whole class, in my graduate school was all men. I was the only female. Then I became an engineer in the workplace. It was the same thing. And most of my career, I only worked with men. The key wasn't for me to walk around broadcasting the fact that I was female. Of course I was female. It was very obvious. But the fact that I was the best engineer, or I was the best in whatever I did, I competed on equal footing. And I like that, because ultimately, especially in venture capital, it's a very numbers-driven business. If I'm making money for someone, guess what? They'll want to hire me. If you give me $1 and I return back $1,000 to you, guess what? You're going to work with me.
You're my best friend.
Exactly. So my message to the men in the audience is, there are a lot of women who are incredibly talented. Don't get hung up on the fact that they're female. Hire the women that are actually going to do a phenomenal job for you, and hire the men who are going to do a phenomenal job for you. The more we are conscious of gender and make ourselves feel uncomfortable and too too aware of it, I think the more we're going to trip ourselves. Having said that, opening up the funnel when we're interviewing people from a much broader set, so we're not just limiting to our own MBA school, or we're not just limiting to our own football team, is by definition going to put in people of different gender, different religion, different race, etc. And there is a lot to be said for the fun you have working with women. It just makes the room much more colorful.
All right. Well, speaking of Alpha Girls, we have another Alpha Girl on the call here, and that's Marissa Brassfield. Marissa, do you want to help tee up our first questions?
Absolutely, and thanks for the wonderful discussion thus far, ladies. It's wonderful to share this webinar with you all. So this first one comes from Allison, and she's wondering, what advice would you each give the next generation of women leaders and investors, those who are just graduating from school and building their careers?
I'll go first. Don't fall into analysis paralysis. Don't try to find the best job you can or the best this or that. Put your foot forward, take your first step, then take the second step, take the third one. If it doesn't work, just sidestep, go somewhere else. I think that in this new generation, people especially graduating from school these days, they feel that they need to optimize on everything. They need to find the very best job, the best fit. And I think a lot of them get paralyzed. So Just be thankful you're getting a job. Be thankful that you are part of a great economy.
I would add there, if I may, and this comes through from spending time with Peter and with these women. What you all have in common is you followed your passion and you're doing exactly what you love. And I think that is the key thing. You know, you don't know where it's going to bring you. You don't know how hard it's going to be, but that should be the driving factor.
I would say don't look at your life as a series of transactions, but I would say look at your life as your legacy. And so when you are choosing where to work and what kind of job you want to take, think about those as who you are, and is that part of your legacy and not just part of being part of a transaction.
Thank you. This next one comes from Stephen. What, for each of you, what has been your most spectacular failure, and what did you learn from the experience?
I'll tell you, my most spectacular failure was getting cut from the volleyball team, from the field hockey team, and the cheerleading squad, as Julian mentioned so nicely in her book, and being disinvited from the prom, all in high school. And it was each one was a spectacular failure, but you know, you can fail so much in life, but with each time it gets a little bit easier, and then you can change your goals a little bit, which makes it easier to go to the next thing. And so just look at your failures as your opportunities and your lessons, and not have too much embarrassment or ego around them, and then hopefully change your goals if you really are not that great of an athlete.
My biggest failure, probably the most painful one, was having to shut down a consulting company that I had started myself. After being burglarized twice, I had to lay off my employees. I had to basically say goodbye to my clients. I was under 30 years old, and it was an incredible, or just over 30 years old, I guess, and it was an incredibly painful experience. When it was all said and done, I had nothing. I was at the bottom of the barrel in the dumpster, starting all over again.
Marissa.
I was wondering if Julian had a spectacular failure to share.
Oh, you know, I don't have a spectacular failure necessarily, but I have things I would do differently. I probably, because I'm so dazzled by technology, or I'm so interested in technology, and that I would probably have gotten some sort of degree, either on the finance side or on the engineering side. That would have been really interesting. But I would remain a storyteller always, because that is my passion. That's what drives me, and that's what keeps me up at night, and that's what I love.
Julian, it's never too late. You can become an engineer.
I know, well, you know, or I'll just live vicariously.
Julian, this one's from Liliana. What are 3 takeaways that you hope readers will understand after reading Alpha Girls?
I think that, you know, there are some real concrete takeaways from the women's stories. And one is to use humor to diffuse tense situations. And this is easier than it sounds, but to have good judgment about relationships at work, in terms of, you know, and these women navigated this brilliantly, the women of my book, in terms of knowing when to take issue with something and when to let something go. You know, when to let an off-color joke go because it's harmless, but knowing when to stand up for something that is wrong. So again, having that good judgment. And as Sonja likes to say, you can't win if you don't play the game. So get in the game, participate, network. So I would say those concrete, real takeaways. There are bigger issue takeaways, but I'll leave it at that for now. Real, you know, concrete, these are things you can do and think about.
And women make great venture capitalists. I think that's a big takeaway for the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go to that, Sonja. So in our Women of Abundance webinars, the women investors and the leaders in our membership, we often talk about the different approaches that each of them take when mitigating investment risk compared to their male peers. What unique criteria do each of you consider when evaluating deal opportunities?
So I always look at market first. It's like I say, market, 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 because you can have a great technology and no market, and you can't fix it. You can't fix a market. But if you have a broken management team, or if you have a broken product, but a great market, you can fix it. And so I tend to look at the market first. I'm always market driven. The first thing I do when I get an opportunity is I call all the customers I can. And if they have no customers, I call potential customers and I say, if they're, do you have this problem? And if you had this solution to solve it, would that be something you would buy? And it saves me every time. I mean, it's almost my secret sauce, because a lot of venture capitalists who have the engineering degree or were the CEO of, this big tech firm, they really focus on technology. And even MJ, she'll say that, companies will come in, they'll have 60 minutes and they'll spend 58 minutes talking about their technology. And I find a rookie mistake, which happens all the time, where an entrepreneur will start a company or want to start a company and come up with this great solution, but they haven't spent any time talking to one customer. And so I just focus on market and customers.
Good advice.
Magdalena, how about you?
I have never, so I was a general partner at a venture firm for about 8 years. I was an entrepreneur before that. And I made every single decision pretty much based on my gut. The reason why is that I had been an entrepreneur before. I was an engineer. I could figure out what I felt the next wave would be from an innovation point of view. And I just focused on that. And I believe that sooner or later, I could never call the timing, never, but I knew the direction that the industry would go in very viscerally. So and then once I saw those opportunities to invest in, I did, and I stuck with them. So I am I have been a very early stage investor. And a good example is Salesforce. The whole concept of, creating a multi-tenant architecture that would serve large corporations was unheard of. And in fact, most of the large companies that we talked to about it kicked us out, saying we are not going to give you our customer data to put on the web, to put outside our firewalls. So it would have been very difficult to really do market research on that. But I did know that enterprise software, as we knew it, had to change because it was so very expensive and most of the features did not get used. So again, my decisions have been very kind of gut-based, and that gut comes from understanding the engineering side, understanding the overall trends of the marketplace, and just a conviction that the industry is going to go a certain way.
Julian, what was your process when researching and writing Alpha Girls? How did you decide which stories to share for the narrative?
That's always a mysterious process. It was actually a time it is sequential, it is chronological. So I have the first of the Alpha Girls, MJ Elmore, coming west in this old rusted out Ford Pinto, a very cinematic sort of scene. And the floorboards are rusted out of the Pinto, and she can actually see Sand Hill Road rushing by below. And so I wanted to get in the very first chapter all of the women out to California. And so that was kind of the beginning of the narrative, where they all get on the same page, if you will, or the same canvas of Silicon Valley, coming from all these different places and backgrounds with these shared dreams, and then go from there through their personal lives, and through their professional lives as they advanced. As you know, as we get older, we add on people, we add on children, we have issues with aging parents. So you see all of these things being added on in their lives, and the added complexities that it brings, and the decisions that we have to make around juggling all of these things. So that was the natural narrative. And then there's a low point in the story. And then there's, a finale, which is not a low point. And that finale is triumphant, if you will. That finale is hopeful. And that's how also I look at the world, that we suffer hardships, right? And those things make us stronger. And that is the narrative, interestingly, of this story.
Thank you. A few questions around advice for women who are noticing gender bias or sexism within their workplaces. How do you navigate correcting company culture without it backfiring? And do you have any success stories for bringing up these hard conversations?
Well, I do think that over time, women have learned to be more vocal when they see something wrong. As Julian earlier said, making the judgment call as to which behavior to call out and which behavior to let it go, to let it slide, I think is a very important judgment to develop. But my personal advice is that if something really feels wrong, act on it. Because if you don't act on it, you're actually protecting the person who should be reprimanded. So act on it with the HR department, act on it with your own boss, act on it with the boss of the individual that was the one who was creating the offensive behavior, especially around sexual harassment. I do think that women, for some reason, continue to sometimes protect the aggressor. And if we do that, the behavior will continue. We will enable that behavior. So calling it out sooner than later, especially around sexual harassment, I think is very important.
Sonja, any advice to share with this one?
I think it's back to networks again, having trusted female networks and not feeling like you are alone, and being able to discuss these types of very sensitive issues and determining what's important, what's not important, and just having these trusted female networks will really be helpful.
This one is from Gina. For each of you, who's your favorite woman in tech right now, or what women-led companies are you each excited about?
Cool question.
I think Julie Wainwright is my favorite woman in tech right now, and although I have many favorite women in tech, but Julie Wainwright, she is the founder and CEO of The Real Real. It's a company that has high-end luxury fashion. And it's basically people can sell their clothes that they're no longer wearing anymore on The Real Real and get a large percentage of the sale price. The company is growing rapidly. It's huge. She's raised tons of money. She does it with such style and fun. She's been recognized by the fashion industry as a real leader, not only with her style, but also in getting new customers who could otherwise not afford luxury goods. It's also great for the environment. And I'm just thrilled to be an investor in her, and think she's going to be incredibly successful in both outcomes as well as, this amazing company.
Yeah, the one point I also want to add to Julie Wainwright is that she's over 60 years old. And not only do we have sexism in Silicon Valley, we also have ageism. So not to have this female who has had really difficult times in her career and has come back out like the phoenix from the ashes. And at the current age she has all the energy. So she's in many ways a fantastic poster child for the industry. I don't want to identify one name, but we have had multiple female-led companies go public this year. And I do think that all of those CEOs need to be celebrated. PagerDuty the most recent one, had a phenomenal IPO. I just would love to see more stories about them. I would love to see them more in the headlines, and we don't get to see them enough.
And the investments that Broadway Angel makes, so we are about 50% female CEOs, and it's well above the industry average of 2%. And so, go to the Broadway Angels website and see these amazing founders. I mean, there are many of them, although I think the Real is a little bit further along than most of them, but they're phenomenal women CEOs.
Thank you. A lot of the conversation. Please.
I'm just going to add, I've been blown away and amazed by Gwen Shotwell, who's the president and COO of SpaceX, in a very male-dominated arena. Talk about male-dominated. The aerospace and launch industry is like, it doesn't get more male-dominated than that. And Gwen runs that company for Elon and does an amazing job.
Well, and you also have Anusha.
Of course, Anusha,
who is phenomenal, who's in How to Make a Spaceship, and now she is the newish, right, CEO of Enterprise. She's such a trailblazer. Oh my gosh, entrepreneur, immigrant entrepreneur, trailblazer. So you're surrounded by strong women. Starting with, of course, a shout out to your mom.
Of course, always a shout out.
I love her.
Yeah, thanks. I too. Marissa, back to you.
Yes. So a lot of the conversations we have in Abundance 360 and Abundance Digital are around your massively transformative purpose and the moonshots you're taking in the world. I'd love if each of you could share either your massively transformative purpose or a moonshot that you're working towards.
Well, so I, about 10 years ago, decided just to come up with what was my purpose, right? And so I came up with investing in people and companies that matter. And so I love investing in companies, and I love investing in people, so including my family, my parents, my daughter, but also portfolio companies, for-profit businesses. And I make sure that every company that I invest in actually moves the world forward. So I'm not investing in companies that are trying to addict children to, games or vaping or whatever like that, even though it might be a good business model. But my moonshot, the company that I'm most excited about, is a company called 128 Technology. And the company is solving problems with IP. So IP is Internet Protocol. It was developed over 30 years ago, and there really hasn't been much innovation around it. And so, people have been putting more and more, boxes and things in the network to make it run better, tunnels to make it more efficient, but they've been trying to kind of solve a lot of the problems that were not, built into IP when it was originally developed, because it was not at all developed for the purposes that it's used for today. And so what 128 Technology is doing is really changing routing, changing IP, making it much more safer, because I think cyber terrorism is our biggest threat to our country right now. Making it safe against that. It's making it more efficient, and that is the big moonshot, is to take over, networking, making IP better and safer for the world.
So I'm back to being an entrepreneur again, and I have a company that I've co-founded called Informed. What we do is we take documents and then analyze them using artificial intelligence, and are able to extract different fields, basically doing the job that a lot of manual labor does, usually offshore, in looking at documents and saying, oh, okay, this is a name, this is a last name, this is an address. It's a very repetitive job that usually has very high error rate. So using software to automate the document analysis and document data extraction. As the world goes, we're creating more and more documents that are unstructured data. Basically, they're photographs of documents that we take and send around. At the very beginning of the session, I took a photograph of a document that I signed for this webinar, basically releasing the video rights, and I sent it over. Now, that's an unstructured document. it's actually zeros and ones. So our software is able to take that document and make sense of it, turn it into a document that can be read, that has data fields. So that's my moonshot these days. A lot of industries, including financial services, healthcare, on it goes, can really take advantage of document processing in an automated fashion.
Thank you. How do each of you feel about the importance of post-secondary education? Will it become less necessary for business success to have that traditional college education or MBA as the future emerges?
So my father grew up in the tenements in Brooklyn, and he ended up getting a PhD from Berkeley and became a world expert in urban transportation. So in our family, our values is the more education you can get, the better. We don't have a caste system in our country like they have in other countries, but I think when you look at education, that's probably the closest thing that we have. And so I am a strong believer in education. I think, dropping out of college is the worst thing you could possibly do to start a company. Of course, there are exceptions like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, but that's the rare exception. So I would encourage people to get the best education they can. I mean, obviously student loans and student debt and the cost of education is getting higher and higher. My dad, who is a professor at the University of Virginia, he says economics is economics is economics. And so you can do some clever things like go to a community college for 2 years and then transfer to a state school if budget is a problem. But I don't think it has to be the top, private expensive school to get it, but I would get as much education as you can.
I'm a big believer in vocational schools. I think that America, with its liberal arts education, has actually done a disservice to a lot of young people who are graduating with huge loans that they'll never be able to pay with the degrees they got. Something is really broken in our educational system. Students graduating with hundreds of thousands of dollars with an English degree or a rhetoric degree or some other self-design degree, and they start life out with such a huge anchor around their neck. So I believe in vocational education. I do believe in teaching the children, teaching our children that whatever they study sooner or later needs to translate to a job. We don't live in the America of 50 years ago. We live in a very competitive, flat world. The smartest people all around the world have access to the same information now. Thank you, Internet. So I do believe that we have to be much smarter about education, the way we approach it, and really question, are we getting the value for the money that we're paying? A lot of kids who are very poor get to, like me, get scholarships. I was on a scholarship, but middle class classmates of mine were paying huge amounts of money for the very same education and not getting the electrical engineering degree like I did that translated to a job right off college, right after college. So I do think that we need to be a lot more critical. We need to be much less enamored with the address of our school and much more focused on the degree we're going to get and how usable that degree is in the workplace.
Excellent. Marissa, I think we're going to have to wrap. You want to ask one last question?
Sure. I'd love to know what are some of the inspirational figures in each of your lives who just really either helped shape your vision and your trajectory.
So for me, my mother, who I write about at the end of Alpha Girls, she's an original Alpha Girl. She was the first woman to play on the men's golf team at Gonzaga University and got a full scholarship, but she was prohibited a year later from continuing to play on the men's golf team by the NCAA because she was a woman and it was disallowed. And she was sidetracked because of this, but went on to become, through her own force of will and strength and love of the game, she went on to become one of the top women amateur golfers in the nation and defended her title many, many times. So she's an inspiration to me. And then the people that I am blessed to write about, from the time that I spent with Peter to these extraordinary women who I got to spend time with for this book. I take a little bit from each person, and that always is with me. Their struggles, their successes, and their victories in particular. So that's where my inspiration comes from.
Magdalena?
Many, many wonderful people in my life who have inspired me, starting out with my father, who had a 5th grade education. So when people say, oh, you're the first one in your family that went to college, actually, it's a lot more complicated than that. But this man who just had a 5th grade education spoke 6 languages. He taught himself everything and really believed in me. So I do think that I got basically off to a great start because I had someone who believed in me. And then Dan Lynch, who was my co-founder in 2 different companies, who, regardless of what was going on around us, sometimes very good days, sometimes very bad days, always had the best attitude and always started life every morning with a very cheery, positive outlook on life. So he's always been an inspiration for me as well.
And Sonja, wrap us up here.
Sure. Well, for me, my father, he taught me to believe in myself, but also the value of hard work. And all the alpha girls have worked very, very, very hard our whole lives. And then Tom Brett, he was one of the partners at Menlo Ventures that hired me. He brought me to every board meeting, took me under his wing. He was just an incredible advocate for me at Menlo. And I'm so grateful to him and his family. And then I would say all the Broadway Angels, all of the 52 of us inspire each other, and we are in awe of the other with all of our accomplishments, but we're also real people and real friends, and are out really trying to change the world for women and men and technology to make it a better place.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to say thank you to all of you. Julian, it's a joy to have you in my life, and Marissa, of course, yourself, and Sonja and Magdalena, pleasure to meet you both. I can speak from my own personal point of view that I am super grateful to have amazing women as my partners and my CEOs and my leadership teams in my different organizations. And I urge all of you to consider that as you are hiring and finding your partners and building exponential and abundance-minded teams in the future. So we'll see you all very soon. Thank you, Alpha Girls. Take care.